So, continuing on the last video, I want to talk about... Okay, so when people are criticizing Kaepernick for disrespecting this or disrespecting that, disrespecting the people that died for this country, they're talking about imaginary categories. And even when Muhammad Ali refused to fight, the reason why he refused to fight is because he knew that these categories are imaginary. And the people that he'd be fighting against could just as easily be part of his family. So all these arbitrary divisions, just like the San Francisco 49ers and some other team, you could just rotate all the players around, and then what will you have? Would you still root for the same team if they just rotated players every year? So we gotta get over this idea that state, nation, spoon, car, flag, that these are actually categories of nature. They're not. We take them more seriously than nature. Even age. When you say someone's 40 as opposed to 30, it's just how many times they went around the sun. But people take it more seriously than that. Like someone that's 40 can be in better physical health, or genetically they could be aging slower, decaying slower than someone that's 30. Now, the map works okay, the age map works okay. It crudely fits, but it's not like an exact replica. It's always going to be cruder than the actual reality. So you know that phrase in The Matrix where the kid goes, the trick is to realize that there is no spoon? Well, it's not that there is no spoon, but there are no spoons. And that's what people don't get when they criticize Kaepernick. And he's a millennial. It fits in with the whole social justice warrior. That's what the millennials are all about. They're the personal bureaucrats. So there are no flags. There's no Kaepernick jersey. So when you burn the Kaepernick jersey, it's not real. It's all in our mind.
It could be you. It could be you. It might be you. It could be him over there. It could be you. It could be you.
I was talking about also how...
Oh man, this is stupid. What are we talking about? Hi,
I was just playing Aphex Twin. That's an example of... and this is Autechre. This is sort of what I mean by Generation X innovating all the music. Now, some people don't like it, but it is what it is, as the baby boomers say. I'm kind of tired of all this millennial bashing. I'm not a millennial, but like every single week, or like 4 times a week, you see a different article that bashes on millennials, usually from a baby boomer. Like they're all moving home. But that's because 5-10 years ago, people could afford to live. They could afford to pay rent. I was doing fine until like 5 years ago when the rent skyrocketed. And guess what? That was because of the baby boomers destroyed the housing market. And all these houses got foreclosed on, and they couldn't be up to code again. And guess who wrote all those codes? The boomocrats. You see, like say like a new grocery store that wants to open up. Now some person that started a grocery store like in the early 80s or the 70s, it's much easier because there's less bureaucratic rules to set that up. But now all the established grocery stores, even the fringe ones, they can't really be competed with, because to start up you need much more to start something up, where it's easier to keep something going that's already started up. So they've effectively they're holding the other generations down with their bureaucraticness. But they had all the opportunities, and they had a higher standard of living when they were younger. I know a lady that's like 48 now, 49, and when she was in the early 80s, she was telling me that she spent about 25% of her paycheck on rent. Think about that. Whereas now, in the rich area that my parents live, the average cost of a room in a house is over $1,000. But the wages are the same as they were like 10 years ago, when the rents were like 500, 600. So, and 1,000 is low in the areas I'm talking about. So when millennials move home, it's not really their fault. I can't, and boomers have a trouble seeing context. They don't see that they're sitting on the younger generations and that they had more opportunities. And they complain about it. That's what's so annoying. And they're not. Anyway, I don't want to get bogged down on that. I was talking about how the four major sports signify the four major generations. But I also want to talk about how each of these sports, they think they know sports. They think they understand sports. They play sports. But they don't really understand, for example, why is each sport divided up into three parts. For example, in baseball, you have the battery, which is the catcher and the pitcher. Then you have the infield, and then you have the outfielders. In football, you have the quarterback and the center, and then you have the inner circle, and then you have the outer. Or in basketball, you have the center, and then you have I forgot what they're called, and then you have the other ones. You see, everything has these three parts. I talk about soccer, but I actually don't know very much about soccer. I'm sure it's very similar. And there's a reason for that. It's because all the scales of existence have three parts. And there's 30 total scales. And some of those scales divide up our perception. I talked in the last episode about the bottom of existence, and I was showing how the inorganic realm and the organic realm, all the scales come in threes, and then the scales are grouped into pairs, and then the pairs of scales are grouped into threes. But the same thing for perception. Like, the fact that all the objects that we make come in with three parts is because of that. We're like almost trying to build the next part of the scales of existence whenever we're making stuff. Like, the obvious one is cars. The easiest one to see is sort of like a truck with a back, where you have the front unit, and then you have like the more spatial cab, and then you have the back part. And it's best to look at it with a shell on it. You can sort of see it looks sort of like the abdomen, thorax, and head, or the other way around. But also the songs, build, climax, fade. Same thing with movies. Except the difference between a song and a movie is that it's like they're inverted. Like, the build and the fade are longer for a song than they are for a movie. In the movie, it's the climax that's the big part. And all the way down to how we have conversations. Like, there's the initial, say you're walking up to someone you don't know, or someone you do know, there's the initial build to a question, and then once the question is answered, then there's the fade, the oh yeah, I'll call you or bye or whatever. So the way that players are grouped on the field are in kind is also the same pattern. I think that's all I want to say about that right now. Also, I was talking earlier about how soccer doesn't use hands and baseball does use hands, and how Generation G and Generation X are linked, and the lack of the use of hands it signifies the impersonal nature of Generation G in contrast to Generation X. The use of the hands is more personal. So, and also soccer is more crude, especially in the hand movements. You look at the hand movements in baseball, it's the most nuanced sport, and people go, no, but there's more different kinds of little movements in baseball than there is in any other sport. Just grips and based on the baseball, and like different grips, you get different speeds, different rotations, different angles, different movements, and there's no other sport where you have to be so precise like that, with so many moving parts, different kinds of moving parts. I mean, people will argue and they'll say like soccer's harder. I mean, you can't bounce a ball in your head or keep a ball. That's all nice. I mean, there's individual isolated talents like running or diving or swimming, but they're very, very specialized. Whereas baseball is not like that. It's not focusing on one kind of physical ability. It's focusing on all the physical abilities. And a lot of the mental. Baseball is about 75-85% mental. More so than a lot of the other sports. It's easy to get in your head, because there's a lot of time to think. And how soccer and baseball are less bureaucratic than football and basketball. Football, it's more crude. It's just more of a smushing things together. You can see how basketball is a little bit more nuanced than that. And personal, because you're not wearing all that gear. You don't know the players as well. You're not constantly seeing their face all the time, and that's more personal. Another thing about Generation G in contrast to Generation X is you saw the counterculture figures come out of Generation G, but they're more cruder than Generation X. Like the Rebel, like you see James Dean, and then you see the Generation X version is much more nuanced, and it's Kurt Cobain is a good example of that. And Generation X is much darker. They're the dark generation. Some people will compare the boomers, but they didn't have an edge. They wrote all this music, but it wasn't dark. And that's where the real is in the darkness. It's not, the way that John Lennon talked about things was in this kind of flowery, slogan-like way that didn't really do anything, and it didn't address any problems. It was almost like too happy. And what else? We've got all these notes here. I think that's all I can think of at this second. Let's see. Oh. So, these 4 generations, the 2 of them are tilted to the left brain, and the other 2 are tilted to the right brain. So the right brain is more spatial, and the left brain is more focused. So in vision, for example, well, this music is a good example of how it's more spatial, less linguistic. It's also less treble. Like the right brain deals more with bass, and then the left brain deals more with treble. It's specialized more for that. And the right brain is more spatial visually, and the left brain's more for focusing on one object. And that's why soccer and baseball are more spatial. And the theme of the right brain and the left brain is the right brain is less of more difference within and between instances, and the left brain is more of less difference within and between instances. So you get, with the left brain, you get more of the same, like generalizing from the old, like I was talking about the baby boomers, that they're not as innovative as Generation G. Generation G did all the tinkering, and everything now is just building on that. Now this is what you call artistic tinkering, but that's Generation X. But to baby boomers, this sounds like noise, and to most millennials, this sounds like noise. To most people, this sounds like noise. But concentrated in Generation X is all the good music. So back to this left brain, right brain idea, you can almost break down all of society this way. That all the issues have always been a battle between the 2 hemispheres. And there's a good book on this called The Master and the Emissary by Ian McGilchrist, and he has a couple of videos, like a TED Talk and another animated talk, and he tries to reinterpret all of history this way as this battle between the 2 hemispheres, and how the left brain has the dominance right now. But that's because the millennials and the baby boomers are tilted that way, and they're squishing Generation X. And Generation G is just on the way out, like I was saying. But if I'm right in saying that they're being reincarnated, you can see how things can shift, that there is hope. Once Generation Regi and Generation X team up, and you still have the millennials and the boomers start fading out, then all of society can change very quickly. It can change much faster than you think. Where I'm talking about an entirely new civilization within the next 10 years. Where we have the vision of H.G. Wells, of Buckminster Fuller being realized. Especially with the push from the millennials, the disenfranchised millennials. I'm not sure millennials would not be like boomers if they weren't disenfranchised, but the fact that they're disenfranchised is good, because if they were not disenfranchised, I'm not sure that they would be trying to help anything. I don't see any kind of I don't see that edge in millennials that I see in Generation X. You didn't see it politically in Generation X because Generation X didn't have the internet. Like, for example, Bill Hicks, this comedian, almost kind of, he was like the initial, before the internet with Waco, he was following that whole thing, but it really wasn't out in the open how corrupt the actual world was. Like, early Generation X didn't really have any idea, and things were kind of good. The economy was good. There was no indication that the world was going to go south. So Generation X was just in bands, playing music, being dark. You don't see anything like that now. Even the metal that exists now, it doesn't have that same edge. The hard rock. It's not, like, you take the song Symphony of Destruction by Megadeth, There's something about that song, that attitude, that just does not exist anymore.